Okay, so here we are at week 2 of the Mastermind program for Nurse Manager HQ. And we're going to start with one of the things that's probably not the most important for you to know, but most definitely one of the things that generates the most anxiety. We're going to talk about nursing hours. Comes in a couple of different names across the industry: work hours per patient day, Whppd. Also in procedural areas, you drop the D for OM, for operating minutes. And it's a slightly different formula, and I can go through that for those of you who are in procedural areas, but it's not generally too widely known. So we'll stick to work hours per patient day. What we're going to do here is we're going to go through the formula. We're going to work out, use that formula and twist it around so that you can work out how many hours you've got. We're going to twist the formula around to work out how many nurses you need to reach your target, and we're going to go through a little bit of master manipulating. The important thing about when we start with this is that it is easier maths than working out a patient's body mass index. And it is critical to know, and it's really simple, and the hardest thing will be casting your mind back to a little high school algebra when we twist the formula around. But once you get your head around it, it's incredibly easy. It's incredibly powerful in terms of being able to easily manipulate what you've got and what you need. And once you craft this skill, then you'll be amazed how much you can achieve by just tweaking things in your ward and getting key people on the bus. That's probably the most important thing, is if you're a nurse manager and you've got your senior clinical nurses on board with this concept and they're on board with your master manipulating strategies, you'll be able to generate a great deal of nursing hours for your ward. You'll be able to get offline hours for your staff. You'll be able to get them off doing rostering, off doing projects. You'll be able to meet your needs by working smarter, not harder. But you've got to understand the maths to be able to get there. So let's get going. Okay, so here we are at a little bit of a spreadsheet, and we're going to have a look at what an average ward might look like. So for the purpose of this exercise, we're just going to go through a random orthopaedic ward in the country. It's acute, does total joints, arthroscopies, ACL repairs, and it's 30 beds. So here in the morning, to start with this, you have to understand who you've got rostered in your morning shift, who you've got rostered in your afternoon shift, and who you've got on your night duty. So if you have a look at that. Now, if you've got your nurse unit manager, that's me for the purpose of this exercise, is always included in your work hours per patient day. So the exercise that we're doing now is just working out how many hours you've got in your ward on a given day. It's Monday morning. You've got an early, late and a night duty for your 30-bed ward. Who's rostered on? So you've got a nurse manager, you've got a level 2 in charge, and you've got a couple of RNs that are managing the floor. So you've got an RN, you've got a couple of ENs, and you've got a patient care assistant for your washers and that kind of thing. Come the afternoon, you've got your level 2 in charge, you've got a couple of registered nurses, you've got an EN, and again you've got an orderly. And then night duty. Now I've put 8.5 hours in here because for the sake of exercise they did a bit of overtime or they didn't get a meal break. So they're going to be 8.5 hours for this. 8.5, so you've got, for a full 30-bed ward, you've got 2 RNs and an EN managing the care needs of your patients on the ward. So that's who you've got. Now you've got a total of 121 nursing hours for that. Now I don't think comes as any surprise to any of you that, you add up your hours for your 24 hours. Now, let's take a look at the formula. Now concentrate on this part of the screen for now. To calculate your work hours per patient day, you need the total number of nursing hours divided by the number of patients at midnight. Now that's a bit of a clincher, because if you have got a load of patients and they all go home at 11 o'clock at night, then you don't get to count those patients. It's only the census at midnight. Now there are some organisations that are tweaking that and they are counting part patient days, but for the sake of the ease of maths, we're just going to go with the usual practice of number of patients at midnight at census. Now you may or may not have been exposed to a situation where you have to do your census at midnight. Switch gives you a call and says, how many patients, how many bums in beds right now? This is why. So that you can do the number of patients at midnight and calculate it. So if we're going to do this formula for us now, let's go back to our daily rostering sheet when we worked out who we'd rostered on for this 30 patient orthopaedic ward. And we've got 121 hours, so let's pop that in. Total nursing hours for 24 hours is 121. And let's say at midnight you've got 29 bums in beds of your 30 patient ward. Now your hours per patient day, 4.2. That's as easy as it gets. The whole country for acute care wards runs on this premise. We just run a number of hours we had over the 24-hour period divided by the number of patients we have at midnight, and that's our work hours per patient day. Now most of you will have been exposed to your target, and it may or may not be more than that or less than that or whatever in relation to that, but your accountant has sat down and said, what was the average for the last financial year for their work hours? So the total number of hours in the 24-hour period divided by the number of patients at midnight. On average, they nursed that ward comfortably at a ratio of 4.2 hours. So let's go with that again. So your target HPPD is born in the budget, and now you have the work hours that you have to meet for every day of the whole year is 4.2. We're going to have a little look at, that's when the master manipulating comes in a bit later, about how you can manipulate those numbers. But for now, we're just going to have a couple of tweaks at this. So if you're the manager now and you need to have an understanding of how you're going to understand what that means on any given day, there's a few things that you can do. So let's take a look at, here's our formula up here, but your question is, how many nurses can I have? So your formula is hours per patient day. Your question is, how many nurses can I have, or how many hours can I have? And you know the number of patients you're going to have at midnight. So say you're running 5F and it's an orthopaedic ward and it's Monday morning. You know, with the exception of a few variables, the arthroscopy that's doing well that's going to go home, or the 75-year-old arthroscopy that's come in that is actually doesn't have a lot of sport at home, which may end up coming in and staying overnight, or the 37-year-old that is vomiting like there's no tomorrow and they're probably not going to go home. Failing a few variables and unknowns like that, you know that based at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you want to go home, you know what patients you're going to have. So your question before you go is, how many hours do I have? Because I know what my budget is. So this is where the year 10 algebra comes in, and you have to change around your formula a little bit. So to calculate how many hours, you swap your formula and you multiply your number of patients that you know or predict you're going to have multiplied by your target work hours per patient day, and that's how you're going to calculate it. So if we scroll down a little bit and punch some numbers into this, so how many hours are you going to have? Let's have a look. So you don't know your hours, you do know your HPPD 4.2, and your patients, you've got 27 now. Patient in bed 22 is looking pretty good, and I reckon they're going to go home. A few others are day 4 and are going to go home. I think we're going to have 25. So you know you've got 105 hours to spend. Now if you go back to your daily roster sheet with your 105 hours, and you have a look at this and say this is what you're looking like, then you know you're going to be over. You got about 16 hours too many. So at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you can manage the rest of your afternoon shift and your night duty. So the question is, how might you do it? So have a look at your ward and think, do I have enough for a PCA? They're all pretty self-caring, none are immediate post-ops. What if I wiped that? Gets me down to 113. And what if I sent Betty home halfway through the shift? Gets me to 109. So we probably won't have any overtime here, so that's unrealistic. Still 3 hours over. What if I sent Paul on a couple of hours meal relief at the ward down the end? I've made it. So now with a little bit of tweaking, I'm down and I'm going to reach my work hours. It's your clinical judgment as the senior nurse and as the manager as to whether that's a reasonable way of managing your workload and whether that's a safe way of managing your workload. But I would suggest that that's something that you do every single day, because the little tweaks, that saving of those hours every day, are hours that could be better spent. And that's the question about contestability that we'll have a conversation in another webinar. When I started looking at this and I was 16 hours over, what could you do with those 16 hours that is better, safer, more productive for your ward than dropping it on this shift with these patients? Now, if you've got a demented patient who's wandering and causing you all sorts of problems, then yep, you're going to have to wear the fact that that PCA is doing something today that is better than this CN could do tomorrow with 8 hours of offline time. If that's the way, then that's the way. But if it's not, and you could be doing something better with those hours, then it's my recommendation to review what you can do at the point of call that you've got. Let's look at tweak number 2. How many patients do I need? Again, twisting the formula around. So again, if you've got a situation where you're wondering how many patients do I need, that you looked at those hours and you've thought, I really need to keep those nurses. I've got that demented patient who is wandering the ward and I really can't change the fact that these are my hours. Then the other way that you can manage is get patients in beds. If you've got 25 patients and you've got capacity for 30, and you can take a couple of self-caring pneumonias, or the 16-year-old who's got a bit of an appendix brewing up, or you're observing a minor head injury, and they're not going to take any working hours, then grab them with both hands, because they really, really change their hours. And you can again do something better with those hours tomorrow than you could do with them today. So it's a tweak to the formula. So you know your Whppd, you know what your nursing hours and the nursing hours you want to keep. You need to work out how many patients you need at midnight to reach your target. So twist your formula around. And this time you've got patients. So you know from your daily rostering sheet that you've got 121 hours, and that's non-negotiable. So 121. And you know that your work hours are 4.2. So the patients you need, 29. So you need to ring that coordinator, or get your level 2 to ring that coordinator and say, hey, listen, we've got capacity for another 4 patients. We couldn't take an acute patient, and we couldn't take one that was a special and that was really demanding. But given what I've got now, I could take a couple of good, solid, self-caring, low acuity patients on the ward if you've got them. That means you get to control what you've got. You've had a negotiation with your nurse manager. They've got their own problem. They've got patients coming through their ED or coming through the external processes, and they need to bed them. So they know that you've got capacity for 4 patients on the provision that they're fairly low acuity or fairly low clinical demand. Then you're working with your coordinator and giving them some options while controlling what you've got. So you know you can take another 4 and you're going to nail your hours and solve your problem. Okay, let's have a look at the master manipulating and a few quirks and a few realities of the maths that's hard to navigate. Now, an orthopaedic ward is a really good example, because when you have a look at the trends on an orthopaedic ward, they are rinse, repeat, the same all over the country. So Monday, let's take a look at Monday. On Monday, your ward's pretty empty. You come on and you've got, after the weekend, not a lot. But there are patients that are pouring in through the day of surgery admission unit, and they're off to have their total joint done. And you know at about 4 o'clock your admissions and your ward are going to start piling up. Now, the realities of a surgical ward are that the higher acuity, longer stay patients are going to happen earlier in the week, and as the week progresses, the caseload's going to get lighter. The reality of that is because the orthopaedic surgeons don't really want to come in on the Saturday and Sunday. They want to make sure that any problems have been ironed out earlier in the week and the patients are progressing, and the odd few may or may not be progressing, or they've got variances going on with their expected clinical pathway, and they can be sorted around this part of the week. And then the lighter patients, like the ACLs and the arthroscopies, happen. Not a lot goes wrong with them. By the time Saturday morning comes, there's not a lot happening with their patient load. So they can control their week and how their week looks, and that has certain implications for the way your ward looks. So all your total joints are going to happen here, and then your arthroscopies and your ACL repairs, and then your lighter stuff here, and you're going to have a mass exodus by the end of the week. So you're going to fill really, really quickly at the beginning, and you're going to be full. Monday you've got an empty ward, and it's filling up again for the next batch. So those patterns, you need to start thinking about how they're going to impact your work hours per patient day. So if we go back to the daily sheet, let's have a look at this. Now, on Monday, if you roster according to your needs of what you think a 30-bed ward would look like, then intuitively you're going to say you're going to need a full complement of staff, because at midnight you're going to be full. But the fact is that probably around this point, 1/3, 1/2, then that's when your acuity and when your admissions are really going to start piling in. In the early, you had no one. You still had the cannon you could shoot through the place, because they're all either in the day of surgery unit or in the operating theatre or in recovery, and they haven't hit you yet. So if you use these hours, then your HPPD is going to look great. So you're going to have 129 hours and you're going to have a 29 patient at midnight, and your hours are going to look great, but it's a total waste, because these people just sat around reading Women's Day and having a nice morning tea. So it's a complete misuse. Realistically, you could probably can all of those. So let's do that. So for your 12 patients, I mean, that's probably unrealistic, but let's, for the sake of argument, you've got 3 nurses, you use the nurse unit manager for a patient load, and then you've got a full complement of your staff for the afternoon, a full complement for your afternoon. Now you're down to 90 hours. When you have a look here and see what this does, 90, then you've got a HPPD of 3.1, which is gold. You've definitely put away some money in the bank. So let's have a look. Now Tuesday, we're going to go back to our full complement, because, let's go back there, we're only have 7 hours for him. Because the weeks look like this. You've got 30, 30, 30. You're going to need everybody, morning, noon and night. So you're going to have 121 hours. So let's just put 121 hours, and you're going to have 30 patients. So your HPPD is 4.0, sorry. 4.0 for Tuesday, 4.0 for Wednesday, 4.0 for Thursday. Now, Friday, orthopaedic surgeon comes in, says, yep, all good. Most of his patients can go home. They're looking gold. So here's the trick. Again, at the beginning of the ward on Friday morning, you had 30 patients. So these guys are doing the bulk of the work. But by the time he's done the ward round and you've packed up your patients and you've discharged them at 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock, a couple of them had to wait for their daughter to finish work to come and get them at 5, and the usual thing. But this workload here is markedly different. Now, if you left it 121 for the whole full day, let's have a look at what happens with your HPPD. 121, but you had a mass exodus because the orthopaedic surgeon did his ward round. 22. Ooh, 5.5. That's nasty. So if you put 5.5 in there, you're starting to creep up. Again, if you left that for Saturday, 121, full complement of staff, but now you're down to 18, 6.7. 6.7. And if you have a look at Sunday, when we think we're going to have 12 patients on average, then your HPPD is going to be 10.1. Now, aside from the fact that you're going to have an assistant director of nursing or a director of nursing screaming bloody murder on Monday when they come and see that number, which is obscene, then you've really blown your hours for the whole week. So let's get rid of that. We're travelling well. Now, Fridays are a tricky day because no matter what, the bulk of your hours have already been spent in the morning when you had your patients. And if you get rid of that, that, and that, you drop them back to 8 hours, 95. So what we're looking at is we're thinking we're going to have 22 patients. We've got 95 hours, that's the minimum you could do, 22. Okay, your target is 4.2. You got 4.3. It's not terrible, but there are some days that you can do what you can do. You can't control that. You cannot safely get those hours any further down. You needed all of these people to cope with your 30 patients, and you've mitigated it as much as you can. That's your safe limit. Some days you have to wear the fact that your 4.2 target is blown. That's why it's really important to optimise Monday, why you need hours in the bank, because Friday, Saturday and Sunday are dogs and you can't control it. Let's have a look at Saturday when you've got 18 patients, because don't forget on Saturday morning you've still got 22. So you can probably get rid of your PCA, and you can probably get rid of one of your RNs. And you won't have a nurse unit manager on a Saturday, so that helps. So let's have a look at what 72 hours looks like. So you've got 72 hours and you've got 18 patients. 4. Gold. So this day you've got 4. Now arguably with 12 patients, I don't know whether you can change it that much more. So you're probably going to have to wear the fact that at 12 you've reached your bottom. You may be able to pull back one staff member. That's your judgment. That's why you're in the seat. But 72, now you've got 12. Now you've got an HPPD of 6. Not much you can do about that. But you've reached your target. That's all that matters. For your week, you've reached your target. This is the important part and where you have to be the master manipulator, because some days the maths is easy, and if you blow it just because you didn't manage your hours well, you wasted valuable resources for here. For these days that are really, really difficult to manage. And you need those hours in the bank to be able to cope. So you've got week to date, and you've got month to date, and you've got year to date. And the same thing just happens. You just average it. Instead of over the week, you average it over the month. And hospitals are month driven. So they have a good hard look at things. They watch your progress week to week, but they really hammer you month to month. They want to know that by the time the end of month comes, you need to make sure that you have really, really nailed your hours, and they are done. Solid. Couple of things to watch out for. A lot of organisations, sick leave gets counted in here. So if you have 2 people off sick, then they get counted in this formula, which is kind of annoying. So if you had 2 people off sick, then you actually have to include 16 hours. Oops. That's 88. Now you've got an HPPD 7.3. For the week, you've blown your hours because 2 people have called in sick. Annual and non-productive hours like annual leave, long service leave, study leave are generally not included. You have to check with each organisation. It's not an exact science, but usually non-productive hours are not included. Your target is 4.2. Now, if you're running your ward at 4.0 as opposed to 4.2, then that gives you a little bit of buffer. Now, those hours can then be spent elsewhere how you wish. It's entirely up to you. Your organisation does not care what your work hours per patient day are, provided they are less than 4.2 or whatever your target is. If you run at 4.0 for the whole year, your accountant will come along at the end and go, oh, gold, 4.0. That's great. Last year they did 4.2, now they've improved, so their case mix must be a little bit less acute, so we'll give them 4.0 next year. That's gold. Don't make that mistake. You must use your hours exactly to the dollar, to the hour that you can, so that you can ensure that you get them next year. So if you can run at 4.2, then you can do with it what you want. But for the most part, you can use those hours for offline time, and you can use those hours for a project, and you can use those hours for getting your accreditation projects up to date, and you can use that to get your 5 hand hygiene moments counted, because it's really hard for nurses to do that when they've got their workload and it's still an expectation, and then you end up doing it. And it doesn't really flow in terms of your ability to succession plan and engender quality and engender non-core clinical tasks. And your team start to think that their only job is to look after their patient, which is absolutely their job, but there's a broader context and there are broader requirements that a ward has to function within. And if you do it all, it's pretty unsustainable and it doesn't really engender growth and lifelong learning. So where you can, you need to squirrel away a few hours every day. Even half an hour every single day. If you drop your orderly back by half an hour because you think, well, the nurses are coming on at 7, they're doing handover, they're not getting any tasks until the nurses come out, get their bedside handover and get a sense of what they're doing. We can't delegate to really till 8 o'clock. What are you paying them for? Squirrel that 1 hour a day away, and by the end of the week you might be able to get 4 or 5 hours. That's half an offline day for a level 2 to do the 5 moments or a quality project or lit research on best practice. It's unbelievable the smallest little tweaks to your roster and what you can do with it. But that is work hours per patient day. Super simple. Hope that helps. We'll go through a few other tweaks and things like that in the Q&A, but we'll chat to you soon.